Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the East Hampton Library in person. And for our audience at home, thank you for zooming in to this evening's lecture. Tonight, we have Dan Faucetta Jr., author of a newly released book, Clarity. And just a little bit about Dan before we begin. Dan is a New York City-based author. For the past 6 years, he's had a prolific career crafting a multitude of short films, podcasts, episodes, and finally a novel. His short screenplay, Challenge Accepted, placed in the 2020 Holly Shorts competition and was a finalist in the 2020 Script Summit competition. Um, Besides creating fiction, he's a passionate runner and fitness advocate. And in 2021, Dan ran in the 50th anniversary of the New York City Marathon, finishing with a time of 3 hours, 25 minutes, 24 seconds. And without further ado, I'll turn over this evening's talk to Dan Faucetta Jr.
Thank you, Steve, for that introduction. And I just want to say thank you to the East Hampton Library for hosting me and, promoting new authors, debut authors like myself. It's really been a great program. So I'm happy to be here, happy to be talking about my book and everything that comes. So I guess the best way to start this talk is to, a little bit about myself, because it is kind of crucial to the story and everything that came with it. The book was never meant to be published in an actual fiction novel. It was meant to be almost a writing exercise for myself and a way to understand a large transformation that had taken place in my life. From 2019 to 2020, I lost over 100 pounds, which was a substantial amount of weight off my body, but also off my mind, and kind of cleared things up a little bit and helped me see a little clearly. But it really was, like I said, an eye-opener that changed my life for the better. And it was a way for me to, what I should say was, it was a way for me to understand who I was and how I became better, but I didn't necessarily know how better I became. Um, and that was why I started writing Clarity and why I wanted to write novels and screenplays. So really the inspiration about a young man who's depressed, lost in his ways, doesn't understand his purpose, and just he's having difficulty in life. And that was where I felt I'd come out of writing this book. I had originally written a screenplay, which was the first idea for Clarity, where it follows a young man. He finds a drug that helps him become more sociable, athletic, just all around a better person. But the more times he takes the drug, the worse his mental state becomes, inevitably becoming a vegetable of state. So really sad story. And I think this was fueled more by my depressive manner when it was first written. But working on this book and then realizing that it had sort of similarities to my life, I realized probably better to do a happy ending than a sad ending. So that was where Clarity started. And I wrote this book during COVID, and it was a time that was really dark for a lot of people, incredibly traumatic and difficult. And I felt there was really no way out for myself. I was doing the same routine over and over again. There was nothing good coming off of TV at all. And I felt that it was necessary to explain my journey, or explain just the frustrations I had with the world and watching everything that was coming out. Everyone wanted answers and we weren't getting any. And it just seemed like the more answers we weren't getting, the less we were going to get the actual answers in the end. And so I began writing Clarity as an exercise for myself, just to see if I could write a legitimate book and test my capabilities as a fiction writer. With that said, it took a little bit over a month to write the first draft, which originally wasn't going to be a first person novel. I decided to change it to a first person because a lot of what was being written was mentally more involved with Jonah's perspective than an actual third person omniscient perspective. It was very much based in his world and his own ideas of what was happening and his own frustrations that were coming through. So changing it to first person was really an important switch, which I think increased the quality and the direction of the book. Um, there was a lot going on during COVID and different terrible things that were happening, really. There's no way around it saying that it was anything good was going on. So what I wanted to do was try and take those and spin it into a positive direction that not only made people feel they could break out of the mold and could break out of the issues they were dealing with, but giving them almost a pathway to do it, as if it was a fiction self-help book that could, you know, we use fiction as ideas, themes, and almost a representation of our better selves, and trying to create a character who could be represented as someone who rose above all the odds and changed himself was important. A lot of the themes in the books were things such as finding identity, the loss of direction, loss of purpose, the lack of discipline. Some people showed just a loss of purpose, loss of identity, the transhumanism movements, and as well as, you know, cloudiness and just sort of mental fog that we tend to have when going through life and trying to understand the information that's being parsed to us through multiple networks of and so writing the book, it was just a lot of deep thinking process of just really trying to understand myself and, you know, understand the world around me better. There are moments of anger in the book, there's moments of happiness in the book, frustration. I try to give as many human and personal emotions to come through and really show himself in the action there. So I guess I should explain what the plot of the book is after. Pretty much the book follows a young man named Jonah Cullen. 100 years into the future, he lives in America and he's lost in life. He doesn't know exactly what he wants to do in this world. People are called wheels. They're meant to turn for progress, and everyone is called wheel because it was meant to put everyone on an equal playing field and made their strives for progress a lot more communal and a collective actionable idea. But with that being said, they instituted a band system of a social hierarchy that would place them in certain fields. Some wheels are in the 90th, and those are ones who are given the more academic and more cerebral tasks in life, while those in the 20th percentile are put in the more physical manual. Kind of represents a communistic idea with a little bit of fascism in it. So just a lot of really dark and depressive things because let's face it, you know, there wasn't really anything good of what the government was doing in those times. But that being said, Jonah lives in this world and it's the only world he knows to him. And so decides to do is, you know, just follow the rules. And we come to him as he's following the rules, as he's coming up to the most important moment of his life, which is the standards, a day-long or turn-long event. Turns are now days in this world. Cycles are weeks. I'm currently forgetting what months are, but that. So the standards are arriving and Jonah really needs to figure his life out. He thinks he's going to fail. He wants to place 90th because he wants to join the Triumvirate, which is a massive ship heading to Mars to colonize the planet in order to create a new American colony. His dream is to go out and plant his flag on Mars, but he's not placing high enough to do it. Luckily, he comes across Clarity, which is a brand new novel medical treatment. It's supposed to clear up his mind, make him the best he can be, the almost alpha of those who live in America. And with no other options and no one telling him that he can do better on his own or to do his own work, he decides to take it. And initially, he sees a very, very difficult world, and he's just thrown into this rabbit hole of trying to understand if his world is true, if his mind is playing tricks on him, or if he's just been lied to his entire time. So with that being said, I don't want to give away too much of this book, but I'll read a few passages from Clarity to explain more in detail of what's going on. So I'll begin at the beginning, and this will give more information to the ideas of transhumanism and dehumanizing. Let me begin by describing the most important aspect of my world. There is a single administration controlling the American way of life. This may not appear to be very different from your current situation, but the powers that be decided not to conceal their collusion any longer. The beginning of this uniparty started with Edward Johnson, who won the presidency in 2040. It was a landslide victory. He was viewed as an angelic savior by fringe supporters on both the left and right who could support him while remaining popular with the general public. He spoke confidently and stood tall, epitomizing the definition of power. Opposing media factions tried to run a collaborative smear campaign about his past, but the public had gotten smarter about trusting headlines. Besides, Edward didn't have a single hair out of place. He ran on an American First platform that many citizens felt had been needed for the past few decades. With the financial turmoil of the past 5 years, they felt a common man like Johnson would be the one to pull them out of the ditches. And he did. His first few executive orders released the economic death grip wrapped around every citizen's wallet. From this prosperity, social change came with ease and in greater swaths. People were willing to work together without ulterior motives. The divide caused by the media had been closed. America was once again a free and equal place to seek liberty and pursue happiness. Joy and satisfaction were at an all-time high. There were celebrations in the street every night. It was paradise. The revelries continued until Edward implemented the first of the 13 basic regulations. This is a new Bill of Rights to be followed for greater productivity. The first regulatory decree is as follows. Peoples of America shall now be referred to as wheels. There will no longer be a human designation for anyone who owns or is a citizen of the United States. Male and female will remain in place to designate biology of the workforce in order to better delineate roles each wheel shall perform. So clearly this is a mass dehumanization plan by the government in this world. And coming up with this idea kind of came with a lot of the we're all in this together stuff while also seeing people fighting each other and yelling in the streets, thinking they're better, they're smarter than that. It clearly shows that the government does not think of their populace as being smart, but as almost being objects, cogs in the machine. And this is one of the greater ideas that Jonah has to fight through, and break from himself. In the end of the book, as he explains this in his own perspective, he understands the difference between being a wheel and moving forward into the novel. We start to learn more about Jonah and who he is in this world he's in, where he's in his depressive state, and also trying to understand who he is. But honestly, he's not very aware of his world. He's depressed and he's got a little inkling of understanding that there's something greater out there for him, something to make him more, to make him better, to make him smarter, stronger, all that stuff. And kind of has difficulty understanding that because a lot of people around him are just fully controlled by the government and fully oppressed. And one of these characters is Leonard, who takes that depression and turns it into full compliance. He is Mr. Textbook, the model citizen, put him on, he's the poster boy. He's the golden child, as they would say. And this next section is describing Leonard and how he is just when it comes to speaking with teachers and role models in this world, just trying to be the best wheel he can be. Mr. Shaw, Mr. Wales called. Leonard straightened in his seat. I focused on my friends. I was eager to hear this exchange. Do you feel that to complete one's duties, one must have a sense of pride before even taking upon the task? We receive our pride knowing we've helped make the world turn for those to come and those above us. Pride isn't something to be ashamed of when we turn it toward an external motivator. Leonard gave the textbook answer. I see. Isn't it necessary, however, to feel pride in our own actions so we can achieve what we do not know is possible? Mr. Wales moved forward. Wheels know what is possible from their placement. A wheel would strive to do more than he was told he could. How is that so? After the standards, his place is known. Do you not think that some wheels think of themselves better than their placement? No, why would they? Mr. Wales was surprised by the confidence in Leonard's answer. So clearly Leonard is full-on government, full-on compliance, and he thinks that whatever he does is the right thing to do because he's doing it completely by the book. And that character, Mr. Wales, is a very, very important character in the book. He is a mentor, role model, but also the jury to Jonah's life, which in the end, he gives him the keys to unlock his full potential and to become the best version of himself can be. But that doesn't happen until Jonah takes the first steps into finding himself and to clarity, which is a treatment run by a man named Dr. Trieger. And Dr. Trieger is a very prolific and angelic type savior who's meant to be a Edward Johnson in this book comparison to Jonah, but something more tangible in his life, someone he could go directly contact with. A lot of the administration personnel and people in this world do not have any sort of communication with the regular wheels. And so they have a group called the Truth and Reconciliation Department to come and pretty much handle the rabble. But Dr. Trieger offers him clarity, and after he has agreed and signed away the liability and information papers, and he's all set and taken the injection, he comes out of it in a newfound state of peace and enlightenment. Although he doesn't use these words specifically, he feels as though there is a weight off his shoulders that never felt before and something he's never realized. But as he's leaving this angelic, almost heaven-like place of the Clearstream Institute where the drug was administered, he opens the door and realizes that there is more to his world than he thought before. And this is where the difficulty of his life comes to play. The world was nothing like the inside of the Clearstream Institute. The buildings, the rail posts, the sidewalk, even the fake grass meant to spruce up the cities were all different shades of gray. I thought back to an announcement where the administration wanted to beautify their cities and bring liveliness to increase productivity. They had said they had implemented it within a cycle. That was a blatant lie. I knew the administration had been untruthful at times, but how had I been so blind? Did anyone else know? The second lie of the administration was revealed as the breeze blew. I had to cover my nose immediately as a disgusting stench wafted from the sewers. At first, I didn't know what to think, but something in my mind told me the smell was excrement. I thought it smelled so sweet before. I couldn't have lacked this much awareness. No, there had to be a reason for it. I would have known if my city smelled like garbage. I rubbed the back of my neck and the answer appeared. The reader must be doing something to cause this blindness, but I still didn't know what exactly. I didn't let these new aspects of my world demoralize me as I made my way toward the monorail station. I guess clarity was already working its magic. As I stared out at the city before me, my eyes ached as I got lost in the maze of never-ending skyscrapers. I didn't know if it was me or the serum, but the rows of columns began to stretch into the distance unnaturally. I quickly diverted my gaze and continued forward. This wasn't the worst of the changes I saw. That came as I entered the monorail atrium. I still have nightmares from this turn. Gaunt frames and sunken features passed before me. All of the commuters around me were husks. Their faces were covered with those lines I had seen in my reflection earlier. Depending on their societal band, each wheel had differing degrees of those lines on their faces. They were so jagged and coarse that they looked like scars from an injury. I couldn't focus on a single wheel since they all looked the same. I was scared. I could feel the blood rush out of my face. The chime to signal the approaching train sounded and caused me to move as quickly as possible toward the platform. I didn't want to spend any more time than necessary in this nightmare. The commuting wheels all lined up in unison to meet the approaching train. I was paralyzed. I gawked at the never-ending sight of these monsters. I shook off my fear as I entered the train. I kept my head down. I thought I might pass out from fright if I looked at them any longer. I stuck myself in a corner where I'd be as far away from these creatures as possible. I caught my reflection once more on the floor of the train car. It wasn't as clear as the floor in Trieger's office, but the image was the same. I had my own fatigue scars, as I now call them. I felt them this time on my face. They weren't deep, but they were there. I felt somewhat assured that they weren't as terrible as my peers. So, pretty much you can imagine what these people look like, just gaunt, disfigured husks of humans, almost like zombies in a sense. They're drugged by a biometrical reader that's implanted into their brain with a chemical concoction that keeps them subdued and happy and working towards the productivity of America. And this is really where clarity is beginning to show itself, but Jonah doesn't understand this. He doesn't know that the drug is combating the effects of his biometrics reader, causing him to see the world clearly and with a little bit more clarity. Which brings us to the standards and his, I guess, first moment of self-realization and self-actualization. The first moment where he decides that he needs to take his own life into his hands and strive for something better, although he doesn't know what that truly is, and he doesn't know if his desires were even the same as what he wanted initially before he took the drug, but now he comes to the realization that this isn't enough and he needs to do something more. The readout stopped and the screen went black. My fear rose in my chest. I thought it was the end. The serum had killed the machine. I thought I was going to be swept away. I was done. I had failed. However, a final message appeared in front of me that melted my terror. I took a moment to read it. Describe yourself. I had planned to talk about being a wheel the correct way, the way that everyone required. I was going to discuss how I'd make myself a prominent, productive, and important member of society. It was all the nonsense I thought the administration wanted to hear. But I would be lying if I said I had answered the question like that. That didn't feel right. I was tired. I didn't care. The standards had beaten me down and the constant influx of the serum had drained me of my resolve. I wanted this to be over and I didn't care to play by their rules anymore. I felt that if I answered the way I wanted to, I would feel a greater sense of accomplishment and pride. I felt I would be doing a more honorable service to myself by not killing my individuality. I began to think of my answer and it appeared on the screen in front of me. I read over the text and my spirits began to rise. There was a small light revealing itself at the end of this long, dark tunnel. All the thoughts I had printed themselves onto the screen. I enjoyed this feature much like I had the altered reality glasses in the section before. All I had to do was think. If I needed something deleted, I just had to highlight that section mentally. I cleared the text box of my previous answers to start fresh. I took a deep breath and allowed my mind to ramble. I let my thoughts wander as I had before the serum. There was a freedom to this flow. It felt good. I watched the words appear in rapid succession. The more the screen filled, the more I felt a fire begin to light deep inside of my chest. It wasn't like anger I had been feeling. It was something new. I would call it a spiritual energy. There was no stopping me now, and there was nothing holding me back. I let my mind run free. The box filled with peace. So here, Jonah's kind of given up on trying to be the wheel he wants to be in this world and at the standards. He's already failed a few tests, and he's performed under the 90th percentile standard in his mind. So with that said, he lets his mind free and he lets all of his ideas come out and he allows himself to be the person he's meant to be. And this is kind of the catalyst or midpoint to the story where Jonah finally has to fight against the administration and everyone around him who tells him he needs. With that being said, clearly there are some strong ideas I've put into this book and ideas that I felt are necessary to be shed. We're currently living in a world where a lot of people are just drugged up, told to walk it off and not given a sense of purpose or greater enlightenment. We're told to just be down and, you know what, just give up. Let the powers that be tell you what to do and let everyone else show you the way. But, you know, we need our individuality back. We need the greater ideas of America that once was, and we need to, you know, fight for ourselves finally. And I feel like a lot of young kids don't know how to do that. And I hope with my book, I can kind of give them an idea that, you know, dark and scary, there's hope there. It might be hard, but you can do it. Talk.
Does anyone in our audience, whether in-house or at home, have any questions? If the audience at home has any questions, please feel free to type in the chat. I could take questions from our audience in-house.
I explained it earlier that it was a culmination of weight loss, which was an 100-pound weight loss, as well as COVID and being stuck in lockdown, seeing all the coming out from everyone and almost everything that was going on. Like if you weren't with yourself, you were just in a ball of negativity. But it wasn't zero. I mean, I started writing screenplays when I was 17 or 18 and trained myself in a more visual style as I wanted to write movies, be a filmmaker, and you know, reap the benefits of being in Hollywood. But as I started to, you know, define my creative voice a little bit more, it was definitely I was definitely realizing that writing in a more linear and literary style was better for this story. It had started as a screenplay before and it was a little bit more depressive. And so it just took time for me to understand myself more and understand the craft of just fiction more to write it properly. Yeah, definitely. I wanted people to know that, like, if you fight for yourself, you're fighting for a better future in general. Like, I believe that if you can make yourself better, you can make the world better, but change has to start with you. As in, he turns out to be a spoiler alert. Um, yeah.
We have a question from the audience at home. One of the attendees says that they're watching the talk as a family, but they're wondering how long did it take you to write this particular novel?
It took about, I would say the first draft took a month and a half. I was writing 1,500 words a day to get to about, I want to say, 1,000 to 90,000 words. From there, I took some time off because I was working in television, a very time restricting job. And so I only had so much time to edit the book, rewrite, and make changes that were necessary. So that process took actually a little bit over a year. So I would say the full final product of the book was in my hands.
You see the book being made into either a motion picture or a miniseries, potential for a miniseries down the line.
Yeah, I either or. My hearts are always with movies. I grew up watching movies. But I feel now that we have limited series and Netflix specials and anything on all that, doing it in a limited series could definitely tap more into the original text. And you don't with movies you can only fit it in so many hours. With TV shows and limited series, you can definitely expand on the world and the characters.
Does anyone have any questions from the audience at home or in-house?
A sequel is definitely an idea that's being formulated, but nothing substantial. I am working on a second book that is not in this world, but in the current world with current issues and such.
Um, we have a question from the audience at home. How did your upbringing in New York and your 8 years at David's help you shape your characters?
Um, I mean, definitely growing up in the world I did in New York City allowed me to, I would say, grow up faster. There's definitely some aspects of childhood that you're brought into being in a world that's go, 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 and there's a nightlife aspect to it that's a 20-minute train wide. So, right, excuse me. And so, really, just my upbringing kind of almost gave me more of an adult version of life compared to, I think, some other people's. And I don't say that in a more pompous or privileged way. I just mean as though the world I was entered to was the world I saw. So there was a lot more with living in a city. It's there's a lot more darkness to it than there is. And being at St. David's definitely taught me a lot about personalities and acts.
The new work that you're working on in the science fiction vein or just a literary fiction drama?
Literary fiction drama with a thriller mystery bent to it. There's a few science fiction elements to it, but mostly it follows a group of people and they're just trying to figure out the problem.
Well, I thank you, Dan, for presenting this talk this evening. And the book is Clarity by Dan Faucetta Jr. It's available at Amazon.com. And wherever books are sold. And there's also a copy, if you're in East Hampton, there's a copy in the East Hampton Library circulating collection. I'd like to thank everybody for zooming in at home and everybody who's in the audience in person tonight. We thank you, and we'll see you on the next presentation.